Recently, a story has started circulating in the defense industry. People are saying they're concerned about Japan's arms exports. Recently, Japan approved the export of lethal weapons, officially entering the defense market. As a result, there are predictions that this could become a major obstacle for Korea's defense industry. Today, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look right away. Prime Minister Takaichi, using his overwhelming general election victory as a stepping stone, has gained full control over state affairs and is showing bold moves, even attempting to revise the peace constitution. Based on this political foundation, the Japanese government has eased weapons export regulations to an unprecedented level. Until now, Japan has strictly limited the scope of weapons exports to just 5 purposes: rescue, transport, surveillance, warning, and minesweeping. However, Prime Minister Takaichi has completely abolished these 5 categories, opening the way for Japan to export equipment with lethal capabilities overseas. With the revision of the operational guidelines for the 3 principles on transfer of defense equipment at the National Security Council presided over by Prime Minister Takaichi, Japan's weapon systems are now facing a major transformation. Under this amendment, even if a country is engaged in combat, as long as certain conditions are met, a pathway has been established to export weapons. In effect, the barrier that blocked weapon exports has disappeared. The Japanese government has decided to clearly distinguish and manage equipment as either weapons or non-weapons. Equipment that can directly attack the enemy, such as fighter jets or submarines, is classified as weapons, while auxiliary equipment without lethal functions, like radars or radios, is defined as non-weapons. Countries eligible to import weapons are currently set at 17, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, which have signed defense equipment transfer agreements. If countries currently under discussion join, this number is expected to soon expand to 20. On the other hand, non-weapon equipment can now be exported to any country in the world without significant restrictions. Defense Minister Koizumi Shinjiro emphasized that there is already considerable interest and expectation from countries around the world regarding Japan's defense equipment. In fact, it is known that the Philippines is actively seeking to acquire Japanese-made frigates, and Indonesia is showing strong interest in introducing Japanese submarines, causing significant shifts in the market landscape. The problem is that there are predictions that the country most likely to suffer from this could be Korea. Within 15 days of the lifting of the arms export ban, Defense Minister Koizumi Shinjiro visited Indonesia and the Philippines in quick succession. However, the biggest problem is that the countries Japan is targeting first, such as Indonesia and the Philippines, overlap with the countries to which Korea is exporting defense weapons. Japan has already approached Indonesia about exporting Oyashio-class submarines, and it has announced that it is pushing to transfer the soon-to-be-retired Abukuma-class escort destroyers to the Philippines. Prime Minister Takaichi also personally showed his support. On May 8, he visited Vietnam, met with Prime Minister Lee Min-hong, and discussed ways to cooperate on defense and security. Japan's bold moves are signaling an inevitable head-to-head competition with South Korea in the global defense industry market. The Southeast Asian region, which has been a key export hub for our defense industry, is now very likely to become a major battleground between South Korea and Japan. Indonesia is a prime example, as it has already imported Jangbogo-class submarines and KF-21 fighter jets from our country, maintaining a close cooperative relationship. Of course, there have been serious tensions, such as the issue of unpaid contributions and controversies over technology leaks, which have sometimes shaken the relationship, but it is clear that Indonesia is still a major partner for South Korea. But Japan is now taking advantage of this gap and making a strong bid to enter the Indonesian market. The fact that the Japanese government has started to sway Indonesia by offering unprecedented financial support for the sale of used submarines is a very threatening sign for us. The situation in the Philippine market is also becoming urgent. HD Hyundai Heavy Industries has achieved remarkable results by winning orders for 12 vessels in the Philippines since 2016, and Hanwha Ocean is also focusing all of its capabilities on winning the Philippines submarine project. However, as Japan strengthens its defense cooperation with the Philippines and agrees to transfer the soon-to-be-retired Abukuma-class escort destroyer, fierce competition with our companies aiming for new vessel orders has become inevitable. The future competition anticipated in the aviation sector is even bigger and more intense. Japan is currently putting everything on the line for the GCAP project, a 6th-generation next-generation stealth fighter in partnership with the UK and Italy, aiming for deployment in 2035. For now, our KF-21, which is a 4.5 generation fighter, differs in class and development timeline, so it may not be a direct comparison. However, we need to pay attention to the fact that Japan is openly targeting Australia, India, and ASEAN countries as potential buyers for this next-generation fighter. The 6th-generation fighter is a key weapon for future battlefields, equipped with artificial intelligence and the ability to coordinate with unmanned aircraft. If Japan tries to dominate the skies of the Asia-Pacific region with overwhelming technological power, the future prospects of our defense industry could also suffer significant damage. Of course, right now Korea ranks 4th in the global defense industry market, while Japan doesn't even make it into the top 30 and doesn't have a high market share. However, the reason industry insiders are nervous is because Japan's potential cannot be ignored. For example, Japan is already strong in the maritime sector, and it is a country with excellent missile and air force capabilities. For instance, on April 18, Australia signed a contract with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to purchase Mogami-class frigates worth $7 billion, which is about 10.338 trillion won. And New Zealand is also considering purchasing these Mogami-class frigates. The country that competed for this deal was Korea. It seems that Japan beating Korea to win Australia's next-generation frigate project was quite a shock for Korea. It's also a signal that a strong competitor has emerged in the naval sector. On top of that, Japan has enormous financial power. In 2023, as part of its foreign aid, it established the Official Security Assistance Fund and began donating weapons to various ASEAN countries. This official security assistance fund is called OSA. Japan increased the OSA fund budget by 125% compared to last year. They increased it tremendously. If Japan uses OSA and low-interest loans together, it's highly likely that Korea's price competitiveness will be undermined. Therefore, Korea has no choice but to compete. Attention is being paid to the possibility that Japan's strategy of free aid could lead to long-term market dominance in the future. Defense equipment isn't something you just buy once, and that's it, since maintenance, repairs, and follow-up logistics support continue for decades. Initial support also affects long-term contract competition. Therefore, from the perspective of Southeast Asian countries, the Japanese OSA is quite attractive because it allows them to introduce equipment without any initial cost burden. Once they adopt the Japanese system, the Korean defense industry predicts that it's highly likely this will lead to ongoing maintenance, parts, and additional equipment purchases. Because of this, Korea also needs to respond to Japan's entry into the defense market. Japan's OSA is extremely powerful. It seems that the Korean government also needs to respond. Right now, Japan has twice as many defense attaches dispatched to the Southeast Asian region as Korea does. And since Japan has built a solid network through long-term ODA, we need a way to break through this. And there are also opinions that, like China, Turkey, and Europe, where the state guarantees defense exports, Korea should also enhance its price competitiveness through low interest rates and substantial loan guarantees. And the United States is currently demanding the growth of Japan's defense industry. Right now, as the US supports two wars simultaneously in Ukraine and the Middle East, its ammunition and missile stockpiles are running dangerously low, leading to a serious depletion of resources. With the US manufacturing base no longer what it used to be, even though it was once called the factory of the world, Japan is seizing this opportunity and trying to perfectly fill the gap left by the US. In fact, Japan is taking a bold step by producing Patriot missiles domestically through cooperation with the United States, and then exporting them back to the US. They've even started mass-producing attack drones, which have emerged as game changers on the modern battlefield on joint Japan-US production lines. This could become the most painful scenario for South Korea's defense industry. So the fact that the United States is siding with Japan and starting to trust Japan's manufacturing capabilities suggests that the leadership of the global defense supply chain could rapidly shift to Japan in the future. If weapons produced in Japan are distributed to allied countries around the world under the American logo, the opportunities for South Korea's defense industry, which needs to develop its own brand to break into the market, will become even more limited. Japan, now backed not only by its technological capabilities, but also by the enormous support and diplomatic influence of the United States, will increasingly encroach on the market. This is not just a matter of fair competition between companies, but a massive battle over geopolitical alignment between nations, and it will be a critical turning point that determines the fate of our security and economy. We must remember that if Japan becomes firmly established as America's arsenal in Asia, the defense export foundation we have painstakingly built could be shaken in an instant. Japan's cunning and meticulous defense industry strategy is ultimately becoming the sharpest spear pointed at Korea. We must not only excel at making weapons, but also immediately come up with sophisticated political and strategic solutions that will allow us to survive amid the pressure of the US-Japan alliance. If we don't, even though Korea's defense industry may seem to be doing well right now, we might eventually see our market share gradually taken away by Japan. So, it's not too late even now, and I think we need to show that we are quickly establishing and implementing policies. The defense industry isn't just about selling weapons as products. It's a highly political act that involves selling trust and the depth of alliances between countries. If we focus only on technology and cost effectiveness and neglect policy support and diplomatic networks, we might not be able to withstand Japan's aggressive tactics. Therefore, I think it's time for the private and military sectors to come together and create proper policies.